This story tells about a girl named Zhao Qing. She fulfilled her wish and married her childhood favorite Yan. However, after marriage, her relatives constantly persecuted the girl, and Yan turned out to be very cold to her. However, Zhao Qing was determined, and she wanted to bring her lover back. Even though she was depressed because of this, these times were truly incredibly hard for her. In fact, all this was a story from a book that Sutton was reading, and she even hosted a special presentation talking about it live on social networks. The girl nervously laughed and told her viewers that perhaps this was one of those stories in which they suffered at first and then experienced a real triumph. Seeing anger in the comments of her subscribers, she asked them to let her finish reading. And after that, she said that in the end they got divorced, and on the day of the divorce, there was a car accident. Jutsun saved Yane, but thereby ended up in a vegetative state. And of course, as soon as the girl read about this, she was sincerely amazed. She expected a completely different ending to this story. The girl was a little worried. She asked her viewers for forgiveness and said that she had recently moved from home and had not checked the book thoroughly, which is why it turned out to be not very good. After that, Seddon looked at the statistics and was very grateful that she did not continue reading it, because otherwise she would have lost all her fans. She did not understand at all what kind of novel it was with a terrible plot and a disgusting ending. After she finished the live broadcast, she opened the book to one of the pages on which it was written that Yan was upset with regret. He had changed and wanted to protect and make amends by taking care of Jokin, but she still could not wake up. This is how the story ended. The girl was simply furious. She could not believe that she had spent so much time on such a meaningless book. Sitin thought that the more she read this, the more angry she became. She did not understand what was the point of this character's repentance after the girl turned into a vegetative state. The girl believed that this would not have canceled the injustice and suffering that the character had to endure, so she did not understand the main character and his actions at all. Sitten lay down on the bed and, putting the book aside, thought that the main character was very spineless. If she were in her place, she would definitely make all the last villains of the Yen family lie at her feet. At that moment, her hand was lying on the pages of the book, and after she said this phrase, everything around suddenly began to shine. The girl did not understand what was happening at all and became very worried. Sitting on the bed, she looked around, and then she also saw that her phone had taken off, and there were also these golden symbols. The girl was horrified. Some time had passed since then, and after complete darkness, she noticed that she was already in some other place. Before that, Seth was in her bedroom. However, now she was driving in a car. The girl was very scared as soon as she saw this. She immediately looked to the side and saw a man who was incredibly familiar to her. He looked exactly like the man who was on the cover of the book she was reading. And indeed, having looked at him more closely, she realized that it was Jan. But for some reason, the man was driving with his eyes closed and had absolutely no control over what was happening on the road. This scared her incredibly much. She saw that they even started to drive out onto the terrace. And at that moment, we sat and remembered that this was exactly the line from the novel. She was transported straight to the scene of the car accident. The girl was in a panic. She didn't know what to do. She immediately grabbed Jan and started shaking him from side to side, they say, so that he would wake up. But for some reason, the man did not react at all. He continued to sleep, sitting. She understood that this was all very strange. She could not believe that she had been transported to this place, only to now die in a car accident, the language of a man unknown even to her. In fact, she remembered that Jan got drunk the night before the divorce and insisted on going to the registry office the next day, so she realized that he definitely wouldn't wake up because he was still heavily intoxicated. Therefore, the girl had to think of something urgently, and she finally found a solution to this problem that arose very suddenly. The Assyrian moved the man. She put her foot on the pedal and began to control the steering wheel herself. It turned out to be very inconvenient, but at least she tried to get off the road. The girl did not know what all this could lead to, but she understood that she could not completely stop the car and saw that they began to approach a small lake that was on the other side of the road. The girl simply had no other choice. She opened the door and jumped straight out onto the road because she definitely didn't want to die. The woman was lying on the roadway, and the car, accelerating at full speed, fell straight into the water along with the man. She lost consciousness for a while, and as soon as she came to, she noticed that she was in a local hospital with her man. The girl Sev looked around on the bed and thought that it was very strange that the main male character was completely fine, even without her help. She did not understand why her character in that case suffered so much in the original story. At that moment, the door to the room suddenly opened, and Yan's mother walked in. Her name was Muon. She looked incredibly angry and immediately looked at her daughter-in-law. Next to the woman, there was also a tall young guy. He was her half-brother, and both she and he were called Jin. The woman, as soon as she approached her son, immediately began to yell at the girl. She called her vile and said that she could not believe that she had abandoned her son to die alone and saved herself. Satin turned away from her and told her to stop screaming already, because this was a hospital. Her son was driving drunk. He was completely to blame for this whole situation, and it was she who received severe injuries when she jumped out of the car to save herself. As soon as the mother heard this, she wanted to shout something again. However, her son stopped her. Jin said that it was his brother who was wrong. The daughter-in-law did nothing wrong until both were safe. That was all that mattered at that moment. So he tried with all his might to calm her down. Meanwhile, she continued to resist. She said that, of course, the Jin took the stranger's side, because Yang was not even his brother, so it was quite obvious that he would not defend his honor and pride. After she got out of her son's arms, she started screaming again, telling the girl to remember her words. After that, she definitely had to say a divorce, and Yan and his family definitely wouldn't give her a single cent. Then Satin herself couldn't take it anymore. She also started yelling at her and said that of course she was happy about the divorce, but she definitely wasn't going to leave empty-handed. Yan had deceived her, so she was going to even file a lawsuit for compensation if necessary. The girl also told her mother-in-law to just try to kick her out without compensation and see how it all ends. By that time, Mother had finally calmed down a little. She had stopped screaming and only asked, in a voice filled with hatred, how she had even laughed at slandering him. She also asked where the girl had evidence that he had a mistress. Satin thought that this was in the novel, but the original owner of the body never found out about it, so the girl was a little worried. I don't know how she could prove she was right. Then she saw the phone that was lying on the table and immediately thought of how she could prove everything. The girl took it in her hands and began to look for something there. Her mother-in-law, seeing how she began to smile, immediately asked why this girl decided that she had the right to grab her son's phone. It was his personal property. But at that moment, Satan finally found the right photo where her husband and a young girl were hugging. She showed it to her mother and said that she already found out who it was. It was her niece Lu. She forced her to get a divorce so that the girl could finally enter the Yang family. The girl looked at her husband's mother with a very stern look and said that she had revealed the truth, and very soon the whole world would see their disgusting plans and how terribly they treat people. As soon as Mother saw this, she was sincerely shocked. She did not expect that her plan could be revealed so quickly, and because of this, she really panicked. The woman had absolutely no idea how Satine could know the password to her son's phone. And besides, she didn't understand how this girl had so many personalities. Previously, she was always afraid to say an unnecessary word, but now she was even rummaging through someone else's phone. She was incredibly angry with her daughter-in-law because the girl gradually began to reveal their plan. The woman even suggested that she had been pretending all this time, but in order to make sure nothing changed, she put on an imperturbable expression and asked Satin what was so special about it. The woman said that she had a fake niece and that she definitely wouldn't be able to prove that she was the one who organized all of this, and she was still going to sue the girl for the slander she said. In addition, she said that Satine's money was in their accounts, and she was now going to freeze it, so the woman did not understand how the girl was going to file a lawsuit without having a penny in her pocket. As soon as Satine heard this, she immediately panicked, because she actually forgot about such an important clarification. At that moment, some young guys came into the room, and her mother-in-law told her that the Yang family had been paying her medical bills, but they were definitely not going to do that anymore. So if she couldn't even afford antibiotics, then all she could do was die in a ditch. Satin immediately started yelling at them and told the men not to even come near her. She would definitely get the money and pay for everything. The girl definitely didn't want to be kicked out of the hospital in such a state. At that moment, when the guys had already come closer to her, the girl suddenly saw a small glowing square that appeared right in front of her. Time seemed to stop around her. She received a small notification that her tip had been credited, and it was a pretty round sum. Satin, hearing this, at first did not understand what was happening and what kind of system was displayed before her. But she was very glad that this system appeared just in time when she needed the means to survive. When the girl thought about the fact that she had really moved and even began to look different after that, she saw a message on the screen that she was still on the stream, and the girl thought about the fact that she forgot to turn it off. Satin was very worried. However, at that moment, she received a notification that the live broadcast system was activated. She could create an amazing storyline in order to earn more tips. She could also unlock the ending after the divorce to return all the rewards to reality. And after reading about this, the girl was really incredibly happy because all this money was from the Soviets for the live broadcast. She was also able to read some of the comments that people were somehow able to write. Then the girl smiled happily and thought that now she definitely could not worry. She turned to the audience and told them to watch how she could deal with these men and rise to the top. She also said that her subscribers should support her and the stream would continue in the meantime, after which the system window disappeared, and she, turning to those present in the chamber, said that she would pay the bill. As soon as they heard this, they were a little surprised, but the men immediately extended their hands to take money from her, and the girl pointed to a plastic card on which the required amount was located. As soon as her mother-in-law heard this, she was truly horrified. She thought that the girl had become like a different person. She never had the courage to save money, so she assumed that she should behave even more impudently. She turned to Satin and told her not to be so happy, because she could erase all traces on the network whenever she wanted. And if she exposed Jan's scandal in the entertainment industry, the public would forget everything about them. The girl, hearing this, was a little worried because she had completely forgotten that regardless of her mothering skills, this is the family's territory. She and several paid trolls can distort the narrative and do all this in such a way that it would not be beneficial to her at all. Therefore, Satin thought about the fact that she was a newbie in this matter and completely without strength, so she did not know how she could now resist this lady. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law came closer to her and said that in addition, the girl allowed him to drive drunk, and she has footage of the girl jumping out of the car. In addition, she just changed his accident insurance to the girl. So the woman explained that this was perfect proof that Satine tried to kill her own husband. One word from her, and the girl would end up in prison. As soon as she heard this, she panicked a little, because she understood that this lady was not to be trifled with. After a short silence, Satine thought about the topic. Does my husband really want to accuse her of murder? She didn't know what to do now. However, then the girl thought about it and realized that as soon as she graduated from the educational institution, she also sold insurance, and you consumers of accident insurance cannot be changed arbitrarily. So she wondered how this woman managed to pull this off at all. And besides all this, after the owner of this body became depressed for the first time, the Yang family used her mental instability as an excuse to take guardianship over her. They took away her ID card under the pretext of protection, but in reality, they wanted to pin all kinds of crimes on her that were possible, and that made Satin even more terrible. The girl thought that it would be easy for them to intimidate her, so she took her bag and started to quickly look for something there. After that, she took out the card again and said that in order to change the beneficiary's insurance to her name, they would need her ID card, which was previously with Jan. However, after a car accident, the traffic police helped her get her things back, and for this reason, she took the ID back. She explained that if a woman wants to make changes, she needs the girl's direct consent. She can't just take it and set her up like that. For this reason, she's already completely lied. Satin also said that the woman had surveillance cameras on which she jumped out of the car and a home camera, but the video recorder recording proved that her son decided to get behind the wheel despite the fact that he knew that he had been drinking. All of this was captured directly on camera, so Satin said that it was unlikely that the judges would consider this an attempt to kill him, so her plan definitely failed miserably. As soon as Moan heard this, she immediately started running at the woman and told her not to be so impudent and underestimate Yan's family. They definitely had to make sure that the girl regretted that she ever got involved with them. The woman also said that she would definitely make sure that Setine got what she deserved, and died at that moment. Her son tried to restrain the woman because she had already started to walk towards her daughter-in-law again. The girl didn't really pay any attention to it. She understood perfectly well that she had won this round, so she decided not to worry. At that moment, the son turned to his mother and said that she was the priest's sister and that she would spread the news of her brother's betrayal. If they arrested her, it would only confirm all these rumors. Such a concealment could harm the company's reputation. For this reason, she needed to calm down immediately. Mom then finally took her hand off him and asked him what he meant by that, and she didn't tell him to distract attention by releasing his own scandals. The woman really wanted Zine himself to tell about some of his shortcomings in order to attract attention to her person and remove him from Yan. The man immediately said that of course he did everything. However, it didn't work. His posts remained posted for some time without interaction, while news about his brother continued to spread. I showed my mother statistics that showed exactly all of this, and as soon as the woman saw it, she was very shocked. She could not believe that it was really true. Jin explained that this was probably why his reputation was ruined, because he had spread a lot of negative gossip in the past, and no one paid attention to him anymore. Everyone was interested in something new. Satin was very shocked when she heard all this. She couldn't believe that this person was still in the entertainment industry, because it meant that even small celebrities could easily get into trends. She immediately picked up the phone and thought about the fact that this person was now really so irrelevant that the news about Yana had overshadowed him, although this had never happened before. As soon as she actually looked at the statistics, she was very shocked because I hired trolls to manipulate Hot Search, and now everything was changed, and she had so hoped that her plan would work. In fact, in the original story, Jin was the child of Yang's ex-wife and was subject to mistreatment. Moyen also gradually slandered him in order to distract him from the scandals of the company. That is why he failed in his show business, which was so important to him. However, she was a former lover and first became pregnant by the hang, and then forced the Jin's mother to divorce in order to take his place. In the end, she soon fell ill and even died, which is why the Jin was left completely alone. Think logically, Moyan also intended to kill Zine. However, he voluntarily refused the inheritance and thus simply managed to survive and remain in the family. He seemed at first glance to be rather gentle in nature. However, Satin eventually assumed that he was much smarter than he might seem at first glance. After a short silence, the man turned to the mother and said that perhaps he should have talked to his daughter-in-law and convinced her to simply refuse this publication. And for this, the mother simply had to stop pressuring the girl so that they could have at least some communication. The woman, hearing this, did not immediately understand why this was done. She said that he was a very naive boy and would thus simply fall into her trap, which the girl had been thinking about for quite a long time. But the man explained that his brother and sister-in-law had a long history, and there was still some affection there, so he believed that they could find a common language. Smiling, he told his mother that as the eldest, he would be embarrassed. However, he was still her peer, and a peaceful settlement was better than mutual destruction, and that was the opinion he held. Jin also said that in addition to all this, he knew several techniques from the industry. Even if it was a crazy threat, they would scare an outsider. For this reason, Mother could definitely rely on him and his skill. The woman was not initially happy about this news, but eventually she agreed and told him to go and talk to her. But if it didn't work out, he should tell her immediately. She would be in the living room next door at that moment. The guy immediately said that he understood everything, after which the Jin entered the room and said that his mother wanted him to talk to her confidentially. For this reason, he suggested that she talk in the ward, since her legs were injured, and they could not be overloaded. He asked if the girl was against this. Satine, meanwhile, replied that she was fine. It was just that some overly smart doctors had bandaged her after the jump, and she could have removed them and come to him. There was no problem with that. For this reason, she soon went out into the corridor where the man was already waiting for her to talk. because brother could wake up at any moment and they wanted privacy. Satin thought that the living room was close enough to eavesdrop, so she figured they needed to move further away so that her mother-in-law wouldn't hear anything. She began to move away, but then suddenly the man turned to her and wanted to start a conversation. But Satin suddenly bowed before him and thanked him very much for what had happened earlier. Jin was very surprised. He did not understand what she meant, but the girl replied that as a person from the entertainment industry, he could easily overshadow her with the news, and she was very glad that this did not happen. The girl also said that he acted very carefully because he was afraid that Maun would not continue to pursue her. He gave her a chance to withdraw her posts, saving her own skin as well. She asked if all this was true. The man then smiled happily and said that she was quite a sensible girl. He tried to listen to her blessings, but she eventually managed to understand everything from the very beginning, and he was glad. Jin also replied that he was very worried that his mother might do something very extreme, and for this reason she doubted for some time. But Satin, smiling happily, said that she was ready to conclude an agreement with him. She could name these publications. However, he also had to fulfill one of her conditions. The man, hearing this, was immediately very surprised and asked his daughter-in-law what exactly these conditions were. Satin smiled happily and said that until all matters with his brother were settled, he should have warned her if Mulan planned to harm her. The girl smiled and said that she would also repay him for this. The audition season for idols was approaching, and she was going to campaign for him. The man, hearing this, smiled and said that he was ready to make this deal. As soon as she heard this, she was surprised. She didn't expect that he would go for it so quickly. She even thought that she would have to persuade him. However, Jin turned away and said that his own mother also went through a bitter divorce and was never able to recover from it, so regardless of whether the girl makes peace with her brother or breaks up, he wants her to be safe anyway. As soon as Satin heard this, she immediately felt very pleased. Of course, she understood that not all people in this world can be trusted, but for some reason, these words inspired her that he was a good person. Satin was surprised that he was protecting her, despite that risk just because of his mother's past. He was very kind, and that made her feel even better. The last long silence ding also added that besides all this was the first time a girl spoke to him so warmly, and for this reason he was touched. It meant a lot to him. Hearing this, she was very surprised, and thought that the first mistress of the body really despised Jing, calling him a useless idler. She couldn't even fake politeness towards him, and constantly showed dissatisfaction. The girl believed that she was a truly terrible character, because Jin did not deserve all this. Well, smiling, she told the guy that perhaps the accident had changed her point of view, so he should get used to this kind of attitude. Jin then suddenly looked at her and said that she seemed more alive, like a completely different person. Her character was now really different from the previous one. The man even asked if she should have undergone a few more tests and examinations in order to understand if something even more serious had happened to her. After all, this was really strange for him. Satin, hearing this, immediately looked at him angrily. The man felt very awkward because of this. He understood that he had gone too far and had formulated the sentence incorrectly. The girl understood that he thought that she had some kind of brain disorder. In order not to further heat up the atmosphere between them, the man turned around and began to leave, saying that it was time for him to go because Mom would suspect something if they talked for too long. After this awkward scene, the girl did not object. And as soon as he left, she activated the menu again and looked at how much money she now had in her account after everything that had happened. As soon as she saw the amount, she was very pleased because it really increased and it was very profitable for her. After that, Satin also decided to read the comments in order to understand what people want more. As soon as the girl saw that they were starting to think that this man could become her love interest, she felt disgusted by it. After all, she was going to get out of this trouble with Jan as soon as possible and get away from this family. Then the girl went live again and said that as soon as the system's task of divorce is completed, she will start a business and will broadcast this drama for absolutely everyone. So she advised them to stay. After this, the girl returned to her room, where the doctor and her mother-in-law, who spoke directly with him, were already waiting for her. The doctor said that although Jan was gradually regaining consciousness, his condition was still unstable, so they had to avoid unnecessary bad emotions towards him and be very careful. At that moment, Yana really came to his senses. He looked around and was incredibly surprised by the hoarse voice of the man asking his mother where he was and what happened. Satine was very surprised as soon as she heard these questions. She could not believe that Jan had lost his memory, but she still had hope that this was only a temporary phenomenon and that he would soon remember everything. Meanwhile, his mother burst into tears again and screamed. She said that it was the witch, pointing to Satin, who left him to die by causing his amnesia. And at that moment, he was going to divorce her. As soon as the guy heard that he had to divorce this girl, he was even more surprised because he didn't even suspect that she was his wife. However, looking at the girl with his beautiful golden eyes, he said that she was quite cute, so he asked why they had to break up. As soon as Satine heard that he called her cute, she was surprised. But at that moment, a warning appeared in front of her that the original male hero evokes a feeling that jeopardized the divorce mission. Of course, Satine immediately became worried about this. Because this was her most important mission, she did not know what to do and became very angry. I thought about the fact that Yana and the first owner of this body were in love in childhood. He once said that he loves girls who look exactly like her and their feelings were sincere. But she didn't have any feelings for him. He looked like superficial trash to her, and she didn't like his character or even his appearance. This man was completely disgusting to the girl. The moment the mother ran up to her son, she turned to him and said that this snake should not let him deceive itself with its face. It was not going to kill him, so he should be very careful. How did the woman tell Jan not to dare to succumb to her witch charms and to be sure to remain of sound mind? Hearing this, he was surprised for a while. Then lowering his head, he did not understand how this was possible. After all, if they were getting divorced, then he should understand. And since after everything that happened, he did not remember anything, he felt uncomfortable about it. The man also suggested that they spend a little time together first, because perhaps he would finally be able to figure out what went wrong, and at least some of his memories would return to him. Of course, his mother was absolutely against this. However, she could not refuse him, and said that he could do whatever he wanted. Meanwhile, Satine was thinking about the fact that her mother-in-law would probably put pressure on Jane to speak out against her. But the girl also thought that if she didn't sabotage her, then Satin would sign up and quickly get divorced in order to complete this mission and live a quiet life. But as soon as the girl thought about it, a new notification suddenly appeared that closeness to Jan could become the source of a lawsuit, an atoning arc. If the divorce is not completed within 100 days, the girl will simply die. Satin, hearing about this, was incredibly shocked. She was even scared, because she definitely did not want to die. She barely managed to avoid this terrible accident in which death was guaranteed for her. After a short silence, the man finally turned to her and said that he didn't know if he had offended her in any way, but now that he had lost his memory, he would like them to start all over again if the girl didn't object. Satin immediately moved away from him and grimaced and asked if he really thought they could start all over again. After all, they had been separated from each other for so many years. Besides, she didn't even know if she would be able to survive at all if she didn't divorce him. Then Jan turned to his mother and asked if she really threatened the girl. How could she tell her to get a divorce or die? He explained that these were definitely not his methods, so he wanted the woman to calm down. His mother made an innocent face and told her son that he didn't understand that this girl held a position in their company, and if she insisted on leaving, then they needed to arrange for her replacement. The moment Yana felt a little better, he started to get out of bed and said that now everything was clear to him. He asked them what they thought about him taking the girl to the office to refresh her memory, because perhaps there they could resolve their past conflicts and find a compromise. At that moment, his brother told them to go ahead together, and in the meantime, he would take care of the paperwork for the discharge and then bring his mother so that she could also help them. Jan took his wife by the hand and told them to go. Of course, with one, she immediately became indignant. She tried to take her hand away from him, but she couldn't. He held her quite tightly. He led her forward, and Satine thought that she could not even imagine that he would want to renew their relationship. However, the system forced her to divorce within a few days. Otherwise, she would lose her life. In fact, she simply had no choice, because she definitely did not want to die. For this reason, the girls had to think through a plan of action for a very long time. Satan also thought that her mother-in-law wanted her to be left without money, but at least she still supported the divorce, and if she provoked her, then the woman could do something terrible to help her achieve her dream and divorce this man. The girl was not going to agree to this as soon as she went ahead. Mama Yana was very angry. She could not believe that this little snake really pretended to be an innocent lady. She deceived her son, and because of this, the woman was very angry. However, this was all she had, so the woman was in no way going to let them make peace, and the girl just had to wait, and then she would definitely pay for everything. Some time passed from that moment, and John drove up to the office, and one of the company's employees immediately approached him and knocked on his window so that he would open it and listen. Since he was already standing there, the man did so. Then the employee turned to the general director and said that someone was waiting for him in a special room. The man immediately asked who it could be. After all, he had no idea. Then his assistant explained that it was his mother. She said that he would understand when he saw them. So he needed to head to the conference room immediately because there had already been quite a long wait there. Jan had no choice but to do this. For this reason, he soon entered a special conference room, and there he saw a young girl who was waiting for him. This young lady immediately became happy when she saw him. Her name was Louie. She told the CEO with tears in her eyes that she was very worried after his accident. She couldn't sleep or eat. She was afraid that they would never see each other again. Since Yana had lost her memory, he didn't even recognize this girl. He looked at her in surprise and asked who she was. The girl then quickly ran up to him. She hugged Jan and said that, in fact, his fiancé Luis had promised to leave Satan for her because they were about to have a child very soon. The man, hearing this, was very surprised. He immediately removed his hand from this girl and said that he would never fall in love with a girl like her, so he did not understand how they could have a child at all. Luis, hearing all this, was very upset. She burst into tears and said that her aunt was right, after all. He really had forgotten her. But she still continued to think about him at night. The man didn't even look in her direction. Sighing heavily, he turned to Satan and asked if she really divorced him because she thought that he could cheat on her with this lady. At that moment, he saw that the girl even began to smirk. Seeing all this drama, he immediately asked what she was doing, but the girl only answered that she was enjoying this wonderful show around. Meanwhile, Louis, still crying, told the CEO that she had heard that his divorce was difficult. It didn't matter to her at all. However, the baby in her belly continued to grow every day, and very soon he was supposed to be born. She touched her round belly and said that if they couldn't get married, then this child would grow up without a father, and she certainly wouldn't want that for him. Satan, meanwhile, laughed and said that, of course, there was absolutely no problem with this whole thing. She wanted a divorce anyway, so she asked the man to simply pay her, and then she would definitely be able to disappear without a trace and not interfere with their family. However, Louis didn't even give the man a chance to answer. She said that things definitely wouldn't work out that way. If she gave the girl a ransom, then what would be left for her future child? After all, he also needed some savings. Satan wasn't even upset when she heard this. She just laughed and asked if she really had proof that she was pregnant from this particular person. After all, she could have gotten pregnant from anyone. Then the woman took out a small sheet of paper from the clinic and said that it was a report for the previous week. The child was already a month old, and everything was written in this report. Satan then took a closer look and saw that it was most likely a fraudulent clinic that was even bought in order to make fake results for her, so that she could now present everything in the best light for herself. In fact, the girl wanted a divorce, but she definitely didn't want to allow her savings to be stolen, so she was going to teach this girl, who was very impudent, a lesson on how to behave. At that moment, Satan came closer to her and accidentally pushed her by the hand. Louis could barely stay on her feet. However, her stomach shifted a little. Soon the pillow fell out from under her dress, and her stomach became completely flat. Satan smiled smugly and said that pregnant bellies usually grow quite low. However, hers was very high, as if she had put a pillow there, And that was why they found out the truth, because the pillow had fallen out from there. Lewin then immediately ran up to her man and said that it was all a lie. She had used our strength to make a special lining so that the child would be warm. She was trying to prove to the man that she was carrying his child inside her and that he should have been next to her. She began to beg him to let the man save his child and all that sort of thing. But Satine decided to take the situation into her own hands. She turned to the girl and said that since Louis insisted that she was still carrying his child inside her, they could go to a provincial hospital for an examination. They would see there whether she was expecting a child or was simply deceiving them. However, after this, Satin also noticed that the girl was sitting on the cold floor. She asked, wasn't she worried now that she might catch a cold and harm the child? After all, rolling on the ground is very dangerous. You can try to crush the child in this way, and she wants him to be saved. Then Jan interrupted her. He asked them both to stop. After that, he told Louis that he would bring her a doctor so that he could actually examine her and tell her what was going on. The girl did not object. However, the man also told her not to come to his company anymore. It was very shameful. After that, he even added that he would explain everything to his mother, so he sent her to go home. Of course, Louis was incredibly upset. She burst into tears and ran out of the office because she understood that her plan had failed, and she didn't even know what else she could have done. The man, meanwhile, following her with his gaze, thought that Satine was very calm under pressure and very smart. She was definitely the one who could handle big and important matters. Then he glanced at the beautiful young girl and wondered if they might have had a falling out over Louis. However, he still had to try to fix their relationship. He came closer to the girl and thanked her for intervening. He was even ready to swear that he could never fall in love with Gaspard Louis, and he seriously changed his mind about their divorce. So he hoped that the girl could compromise. Hearing this, Satine was very indignant. She said that she actually did not help him. She simply hated scammers, and also asked him to listen to her attentively once and for all and remember. She screamed, looking him straight in the eyes, and said that this divorce had to happen, and she was not going to consider any other options. When Jan was about to say something, one of his assistants suddenly knocked on the door of his office. He turned to the chief director and asked if everything was okay with him. He sighed heavily and said that he was fine, after which he asked to be taken to his office. He was going to try to do his wife's work, but he never answered because he was already tired of hearing all these refusals. Jan started to leave and glanced at the girl and thought about what he had to do to make her hate him so much. At that moment, a new notification appeared in front of the girl that she had received additional money. As soon as Satin heard about it, she was happy, but she was still upset by the fact that she had limited time before the divorce, and if she couldn't do it, she would simply die. Yana also thought that if her old job as a streamer were in this world, she wouldn't care about Yana's money and would just be able to leave. However, now she had to fight for money at least to somehow survive. Then Satin decided that she should start earning now, and thus she could get a divorce on her own terms. This idea was recommended to her in the comments, and she was very happy because it really was logical. The girl thought that the original owner of the safe had written a recipe for space weapons that were a family heirloom. Skotina decided that with her tips, she could make samples and sell them for instant capital. But first, she needed to somehow escape from Yang's mansion and start living her own life. At the moment she thought about it, her phone suddenly rang in her pocket. The girl was a little surprised, but she immediately picked up the phone. It was one of Jan's secretaries. She said that the CEO invited her to his office. For this reason, she had to go upstairs. The girl, hearing this at first, was very surprised. However, I still really had to do it. At that very time, in the lobby where Yan's mother was, Louis ran there and cried loudly. The woman was furious as soon as she heard the whole story that the girl told her. She could not believe that Satin actually told her such words. Louis continued to cry and turned to her aunt and asked her to help her. After all, she no longer knew what to do and how to fix the situation. Then Moyan thought about all this. She said that she only wanted the girl to be left without money in order to save her efforts. However, now she realized that it was necessary to crush this girl completely because she was too greedy. By the time Satine had already gone up to the top floor, She knocked and saw the secretary, who was collecting some papers for the gentleman. The man, as soon as he saw her, immediately came closer to the girl, and smiling said that before the divorce negotiations, she was the secretary of the general director Yan, and he would like her to resume her work from the next day. The girl, upon hearing this, was immediately very surprised. However, she said that she did not want to work as a maid for him, but was going to become a streamer. The man who was sitting not far from her, having heard this, immediately asked his assistant if they had any streamer positions. His assistant nervously smiled and asked what a streamer was. He even asked if it was something like a news anchor, and also told the gentleman that they never had such positions at all. Satin replied that she had no intention of getting a job at their company. She asked them to call the HR manager immediately. The man smiled nervously and said that it was impossible. According to her contract, leaving their company, whether it was a move to competitors or starting her own business, required fines in the amount of 1 million yuan. The girl, hearing this, was sincerely amazed. She could not believe that this could be true, since no one had warned her about this. Satin thought that this was, of course, the work of Moan, and this made her very angry. She hit Yan's assistant, and he almost dropped the papers. The girl said, in an incredibly angry voice, that he couldn't deceive her during the divorce, so instead, he decided to rig the company's contract. She also asked if it was true that this clause was added quite recently, and just ran her hand over the ink that was still imprinted on her finger from the paper. The girl said that they had not yet dried, so it was quite obvious that this point had been added quite recently, and it had not been introduced. Then the assistant said that of course all this was so. However, this document had her personal seal on it, and it was required by law. Therefore, she simply had no choice. The girl could not believe that everything really happened like this. Initially, the owner really wanted to leave a complete mess for her. Satin thought that it was very strange that she trusted her husband so desperately that she even handed over the ID and personal seal to Jan's family. But now she had no choice. She had to get out of it. The girl smiled and said that they really were heartless capitalists. But this lady was not insurance. Satin also added that she will earn enough by selling various things that by becoming a freelancer, she will be able to earn not only for the fine, but also for the legal costs of her husband's treacherous actions. Jan, hearing this, frowned again. He turned to the girl and asked why she had to be so rude. The man also said that if she stops until his memory returns, he will definitely pay her money when she can leave after he really remembers everything and makes a decision. Satin then sighed heavily and thought that he could cancel it with one word, because he was the CEO. These were such cheap tricks only to keep her. She could not understand why he decided to play the good and fluffy in this whole situation. After a long silence, she said that she was not interested in all this. She did not know when he would be able to recover, therefore she needed this divorce immediately. So at that moment, their conversation was interrupted by a ding who knocked on the door and came into his brother's office and said that he heard them arguing from the hallway. He asked them what was going on. Why such a scream? Yana sighed heavily and said that his daughter-in-law wanted to become a streamer. There was no such position in his company, so she was going to leave. However, their contract could not allow this without additional payments, and it was for this reason that they had a small dispute. Meanwhile, Jin approached his assistant and immediately looked at this contact in order to understand who was right and who was guilty in this situation. After a short silence, the man asked if there were any loopholes in this contract. He was addressing the girl directly. Satin was a little surprised when she heard this, and the man explained that it said that she could not leave their company. However, it did not indicate the role in which she was supposed to work there. The guy explained that if she forbids them from acting as a subsidiary company, there is a lot of room for a chance to launch a subsidiary or incubator for streaming directly from their company, and then the contract will be honored, and everyone will win. He also said that if their company didn't have what it wanted, it could create its own position, because internal startups would definitely not violate this contract. For this reason, everyone would also be happy. Jan, having heard all this, thought about it. However, he soon said that the man was indeed right and it was a good decision. Before he left the office, he told the girl that he would notify the general committee that they should organize a department, especially for her, and he did not want such hysterics to happen anymore. Satin was actually pleased with everything, so after that, she turned to Jin and asked him how he was able to notice such a wonderful loophole so quickly, since she would not have even thought about this solution. The man smiled and replied that his contracts in the entertainment industry were much more complicated, and without the skills to find a way out, he would have definitely been eaten alive over the years. Of course, he is a rich heir who is simply in show business. However, the Yang family never protected him for this reason. He had to find his own methods in order not to succumb to the provocations of others. Satin was actually very happy about this. She thanked him and said that she, of course, half-jokingly asked him for help. However, now he was definitely her most professional ally. The man smiled and then asked if it wasn't she who had helped him from the very beginning. He had heard about Louis. He hated her. This girl had suggested using his scandals for control and damage. He also said that his mother is too old to understand these tricks that the girl manipulates her with, but he can see everything from the outside. Then she was a little surprised, but in fact she even forgot about the poor detail. After all, this incident could only strengthen their alliance, and she was very happy. After a short silence, Jin turned to the girl and said that she could do absolutely anything she wanted. If she needed help, she could just ask him, and he would definitely do everything for her. Satin smiled and said that she was happy that he offered her this, and that if anything happened, she could really contact him, and she herself was very serious, because the time had come to implement her business plan. At that very moment, Mother Yana had already arrived at the conference room where the man was heading for the meeting. As soon as she entered, she immediately started yelling at him, and this woman was so angry because she found out the latest news that Ian was going to let that idiot Satin start a business under their company. The feeling, of course, did not like the fact that his mother called the girl names. However, he said that she was reasonable. They had already quarreled over the fine, and if he turns out to be, then she will simply burn all bridges and stop communicating with them. His mother replied that this contract was a plan of his father and the board to control her, and he simply took it and did not take into account that there were such holes in it, and he easily agreed to fulfill any of her whims. Jan replied that first, they had to wait until this project was launched, and then they would come to an agreement. If she ran away, then no one would be able to help restore his memory for this reason. He had to keep her close. The woman, hearing this, was still very angry. She did not understand what was wrong with her son at all. I think Natsia listened to her every word. However, now, for some reason, he began to defend the girl and contradict his mother. However, the woman did not worry too much. She believed that her talent began and ended with the formula of the Zhou family's cosmetics, and she was definitely not capable of more. She was very pleased because her parents forbade using it for promotions or sales. Only for personal use it was allowed. So she decided that she could put pressure on Satin using exactly the same arguments. Since then, several days have passed, and finally, with one, I received the original formula of cosmetics, the original owners of this body. And the girl did not hesitate. She was already able to negotiate with suppliers, and soon produced quite a large quantity of her products so that she would have something to sell. And after some time, she was finally given a separate office, where the girl already had her own film crew set up, and she advertised her own products live on air. Sitting in front of the camera, Satan said that budget eyebrow pencils and luxurious hand cream were on sale that day, so they could easily buy them with just one click of a button. The girl also told her audience to support home brands. It is affordable and premium. Both products shown in that video were in stock, so they could order it at any time. And immediately after this live broadcast happened, her sales increased. As soon as her manager saw it, he was very amazed. He could not believe that her sales could increase so much in just one night. He said that even the best salesman in the company could not compare to this, and for this reason, he really admired the girl and her professionalism. Then Satine, smiling at the camera, told her viewers that this was the end of her live broadcast. The next one was supposed to happen in a few days, and also with a mystery guest who would show them new products. So she advised them not to miss it under any circumstances. In fact, she was very happy because in a few more months, she would be able to be financially free, and then she would definitely be unstoppable. She would divorce her husband, and everything would be fine. At that moment, the door to her office suddenly opened and her mother-in-law came in. She turned to the girl and said that using company resources for personal gain was not just a violation. It was a real kidnapping. When she saw this woman, Satin wasn't even surprised. She asked if the woman had really come again with her ridiculous legal threats. However, of course, she didn't believe them, and she was already tired of them. Satin raised one of the papers and said that her family created the cosmetics and that she used her form, so she did not understand why she mentioned the name of the Yan family. Then one of Satin's assistants said that the woman should under no circumstances touch the company's inventory, because this could be severely punished. Following them, Jan also came in. He turned to his mother and asked why she was always trying to interfere in all this, because he had already approved this decision a long time ago and did not understand why she was so persistent. The woman turned to her son and said that they had a cosmetic line, and this woman's cosmetics were a competitor for them, so she believed that they had to separate them. She also added with an evil smile that she simply wants the woman to prove her independence in the formula. A clear brand will help both sides sell better. Jan, having heard her position, thought about it and said that it was indeed fair. Therefore, in this regard, he agreed with his mother. One, upon hearing this, immediately became angry, because it was quite obvious that the woman wanted her to prove her identity by submitting the formula for examination for comparison. But in this way, she would simply steal it, and that would be the end of it. However, the man approached his wife and asked what her plan was, because he was ready to support her. However, the girl told him to put his acting skills aside. She had already understood everything for herself, so he did not have to worry. Satin thought that the only way to protect the formula was to acquire a celebrity to promote it. But with her profits, she could certainly afford one, so the girl decided not to hesitate and immediately get down to business. The girl called and asked if it was true that it was a studio of artists. When she was told that it was, she said that she represented a cosmetic brand and was looking for cooperation. Meanwhile, one of the girl's assistants turned to Yan's mother and said that the guests of the live broadcast, the young Moldovans, were Mrs. Sen. She was an idol of the new generation and a tester in fashion and makeup. He also told the woman that she would definitely have a good effect on the views and purchases of the girl's products, so he had to take this point into account. As soon as the woman heard this, she immediately frowned and told him to contact the brand that supported this star and warn them that if she agreed to this job, she would be blacklisted by the entire industry. The man, of course, was a little worried about this, but he said that he understood everything, and after that, he immediately went to do it. Some time passed since that moment, and when Satin was again at the studio, she turned to her assistant and asked her to finally receive new samples of the products that had just recently arrived to them, and the assistant immediately ran to fulfill them. At that moment, another man approached the woman and said that they had bad news because her star had canceled their meeting due to health reasons, and the guest spot that Sen was supposed to occupy was now free. Satin, hearing this, of course, immediately became a little upset because she understood that this could become a big disaster for her, because she had already promised the audience an interesting guest. But Yan's mother was incredibly pleased at the time. She went into the girl's studio and said that she heard that they needed a celebrity to confirm the uniqueness of her products, and asked where her guest was, who should have already been there. But Satin did not get upset. She said that she was perfectly aware of the fact that the woman simply wanted to take the formula from her. However, she asked, did she really think that she could get it so easily? However, she had no chance of that. Her mother-in-law immediately frowned and said that the girl had not been able to provide the audience with a guest. Therefore, she was wondering how she was going to explain this whole situation to her audience, who were eagerly awaiting some star. However, Satin did not become despondent. She said that she never broke her promises, and this time she did not intend to. The guest was behind her. For this reason, everything was under control. That very moment she pointed to Diane, who also came to support the girl. He was very surprised and asked if she really meant him. Meanwhile, she took him by the hand and began to move him closer to the cameras. She said that today was his show, so he could feel free to come through. Immediately after this, the girl began a live broadcast. She pointed to the man who was standing next to her and asked them to let her introduce her wonderful guest, who came especially for this broadcast. And Satine said that this is the current champion among the highest category performers of the Rising Idol, and his name is Woo Yan-jin. After that, she went out of frame and told her mother-in-law that booking another guest was just a bait. She knew that the woman would block everyone she invited, so it was a pretty obvious move. She also added that since her son came with Jan, she decided to involve him in this initiative, considering that it could even be a good thing. The woman was about to come forward to continue the argument with Satin. However, her manager escorted the woman general director, saying that the broadcast had already begun. They could watch it on the screen in the lobby, but should not be present in the studio so as not to interfere. Of course, this made her very angry. However, soon she and her dear son found themselves driven out the door like dogs. Satin, meanwhile, continued to talk to the audience. She said that Jin's live appearance often deceptively aged him in photographs and magazines. But in reality, in real life, he looked completely different. The girl read the comments and saw that people liked this cooperation. After that, the girl said that they were testing a classic men's foundation against her new formula. She was interested in which one would be best suited for Jin. It was with this initiative that she wanted to show that she had everything under control after the girl applied one product to the man. He began to look a little different because the foundation really changed even his facial expression. And the audience immediately looked at it and began to vote. After that, Satin suggested using her products, and after washing it off, she began to apply it. After some time, he began to look much more natural and even a little younger. The guy really had a refreshing expression on his face and was very handsome, completely different from how he was depicted in magazines. Satin ultimately made a small verdict that the classic foundation was suitable for oily skin types in the powder base, but for drier skin types like Sin's, their new moisturizing line will be just perfect. They immediately began to praise her and order her, while her mother-in-law and husband stood in the lobby and really watched this broadcast, which was going just perfectly. Of course, the woman was incredibly angry, because it was the snake that was able to make an excellent game. She distinguished her formula, increased sales, and remained in debt to design. The girl really tried hard and thought out the perfect strategy. Jan, who had been watching the broadcast all this time, suddenly came closer and said that the girl was really beautiful. Even as a streamer, she was amazing, so he thought that he needed to try and keep her as his wife. His mother, hearing all this, was very surprised and asked what he meant. The man explained that everything was very simple. He was postponing their divorce. Ian explained to his mother that she was an incredibly big asset to their company, so he saw no point in separating them because then she would go somewhere else and would not be as useful to them. At that moment, the woman seriously thought about it. She understood that the longer the Satin remained, the more risky her previous actions were. However, now she simply had to improvise. There was no other way out. That's why she followed her son, who started to leave, and said that she was really capable, but very cunning. She was just worried that they could deceive me, and for this reason, she wanted to protect him in every way. But the man just sighed heavily and simply asked her to give it a try. He would not have become a CEO anymore if he had not used various schemes. His mother was incredibly surprised when she heard this. She did not expect to hear such things from her son, because this was a really good argument. But before leaving, Jan also asked his mother if she had any idea for them to die, because that was much more important. The girl thought that this was a real disaster. Her son was now completely enchanted by this idiot, and she could not do anything about it. Otherwise, he would only shit on her and definitely stop listening. So in the end, she smiled and said that if he was serious, then she really did have a good plan to reconcile them, and she thought it might even work. After Satin's broadcast ended, she saw how much her sales had increased and was also very pleased, because it was already 5 times more than the last broadcast. She was able to break her record and was very happy. In addition, she received a notification from the system that a lot of people were watching her argument with her mother-in-law, and she was very surprised because she considered this figure to be simply unrealistic. As soon as she opened the comments, she saw a little concern from them. However, she told her viewers that they didn't have to worry, because once the divorce was finalized, she would be able to show even more interesting drama. Satin believed that with such an income, she could not even worry about leaving without a penny or breaking the contract. She had all the necessary means to now live separately and pay for everything that was needed. She was going to retire the very next day and get a divorce in a few days. But first, she had to do something else. However, at that moment, her son came up to her and looked at her. The girl, seeing him, immediately thanked him for his help. The girl said that without him, this live broadcast would have definitely failed, and also cheated on him for involving him without prior warning about it. She understood that this brought him some discomfort, but the man replied that there was no need for an apology. He was glad that everything worked out, and also added that, for him, this broadcast was a big plus. He showed the statistics on his phone about his popularity, and said that his agent says that his rating has skyrocketed much higher than before, which was unthinkable for him. However, after just one live broadcast, he got such fans. After that, he also added that she was right. His previous makeup was wrong, the photos were overly edited, and because of this, he looked completely unnatural and even unattractive in some moments. Smiling, he also said that Satin should continue to sell her products, because in this way she gets sales, and he had an obvious influence and winning interaction, and he would like to continue collaborating with her in the future.